When I arrived at my sister's wedding, my seat was behind a curtain. Her FIL smirked. Only real family gets a table. There wasn't even a place card for me. Her groom giggled. Guess you're just extra. I picked up my gift, stood up, and proclaimed, cool, I'll take my extra $10,000 and go. His face dropped sooner than I expected. I, 32M, never thought I'd be writing this, but here we are. 3 months ago, I was standing in what should have been one of the happiest moments of my family's life, holding a check that would change everything. My sister had always been the golden child. While I worked my way through engineering school and built my consulting firm from nothing, she floated through life expecting everyone else to catch her when she fell. Our parents died when I was 25 and she was 22, leaving behind enough life insurance to cover their debts and not much else. I became her safety net. When she announced her engagement to someone from a wealthy family, I wasn't surprised. She'd always been drawn to money and status. What did surprise me was how quickly she seemed to forget where she came from. The wedding was set to be this elaborate affair at their family's country club. When the invitation arrived, it looked expensive enough to feed a small village. I'd already planned to give them a generous gift, $10,000 I'd saved specifically for her wedding. It represented months of extra work, late nights, and skipped vacations, but she was my only family. The first red flag came when I called to confirm details about the bachelor party. My sister's voice had this strange, distant quality when she told me her fiancé's brothers were handling everything and that it would be mostly his side of the family. I offered to contribute or help organize something, but she brushed me off, saying they had it covered. The second red flag was when I never received any details about rehearsal dinner, family photos, or any of the pre-wedding events. When I asked, she explained that they were keeping things small and intimate. Just immediate family, she said. I didn't push it, thinking maybe she was stressed about wedding planning. The day of the wedding arrived, and I dressed in my best suit, the one I'd bought specifically for this occasion. I drove 2 hours to the venue, a sprawling estate that probably cost more than most people's houses. The parking lot was full of luxury cars that made my reliable Honda look like it belonged in a different zip code. Inside the venue, everything was pristine. White flowers everywhere, gold accents, crystal chandeliers that probably cost more than my annual salary. I approached the seating chart, looking for my name among the carefully calligraphed cards. I scanned the tables once, then twice, then a third time, thinking maybe I'd missed it. My name wasn't there. A wedding coordinator in a sharp black suit approached me and asked if I needed help finding my seat. I explained I was the bride's brother and couldn't locate my name on the seating chart. She looked confused, checked her clipboard, and told me to wait while she consulted with the wedding planner. 5 minutes later, she returned with an apologetic smile and led me toward the back of the venue. Behind the main seating area, separated by an elegant white curtain, were 3 chairs that looked like afterthoughts. No table, no place settings, no flowers. Just 3 chairs facing the back of the ceremony space. I stood there for a moment, processing what was happening. This couldn't be right. There had to be some mistake. That's when my sister's father-in-law appeared beside me. He was exactly what you'd expect from old money. Silver hair, expensive suit, and the kind of smile that never reached his eyes. He looked at me standing behind the curtain, and that smirk spread across his face. He informed me, with obvious satisfaction, that only real family gets a table. Real family. The words hit me like a physical blow. I was still trying to process this when the groom himself walked over. He was supposed to be getting ready for photos, but apparently seeing me relegated to the back row was entertainment enough to delay his schedule. He looked at me standing there with my carefully wrapped gift and let out this little giggle that made my blood run cold. He suggested, with mock concern, that I was just extra. Extra. Like I was some random guest who'd crashed their perfect day. The gift in my hands suddenly felt incredibly heavy. I looked down at the elegant box containing the check I'd worked so hard to save. $10,000. Money that could have gone toward the down payment on a house I'd been considering, or the vacation I hadn't taken in 3 years, or a dozen other things that might have actually improved my life. Instead, I'd planned to give it to someone who had just made it clear that I wasn't even worth a place setting. Something inside me shifted. Maybe it was the culmination of years of being taken for granted, or maybe it was just the sheer audacity of the situation, but I felt this calm settle over me. The kind of calm that comes right before you do something that changes everything. I picked up the gift box and stood up straighter. In a voice loud enough for nearby guests to hear, I announced that it was cool, and I'd just take my extra $10,000 and go. The effect was immediate and beautiful. The groom's face went from smug satisfaction to wide-eyed panic faster than I'd expected. His mouth actually fell open, and for a second, he looked like a fish gasping for air. The father-in-law's smirk disappeared completely. He started to stammer something about there being a misunderstanding, but I was already walking away. I could hear whispers starting behind me as other guests processed what they'd just witnessed. $10,000 was apparently significant enough to get their attention, even at a wedding where the flowers probably cost half that amount. I walked straight out of the venue, gift in hand, and drove home. The whole drive, I kept expecting to feel regret or sadness, but all I felt was this incredible lightness. Like I'd been carrying something heavy for years and had finally set it down. Update 1. The fallout started before I even got home. My phone was buzzing constantly with calls and texts. My sister called 7 times during my 2-hour drive. I didn't answer. When I finally listened to the voicemails, the progression was fascinating. The first one was angry. How could I cause a scene at her wedding? The second was accusatory. I was trying to ruin her special day. By the fourth one, panic had set in. By the 7th, she was crying and begging me to call her back. The text messages were a similar journey through the 5 stages of grief, with some creative additions. Apparently, word had spread quickly through the wedding party about what had happened. Several guests had approached my sister asking about her brother and the $10,000. The groom's family was asking questions. People were wondering what kind of family doesn't seat the bride's only brother at a proper table. I turned off my phone and spent the evening reading a book I'd been meaning to get to for months. It was peaceful. The next morning brought more calls, but now other people were getting involved. The groom himself called, his voice much different than it had been the day before. Gone was the casual cruelty, replaced by what sounded like genuine desperation. He explained that there had been a misunderstanding, that they never meant to make me feel unwelcome, and that they'd love to have me over for dinner to talk things through. I listened to the whole message before deleting it. My sister's mother-in-law called next. Her tone was carefully controlled, the kind of diplomatic voice that probably served her well in whatever social circles she moved in. She explained that seating arrangements at weddings were always complicated, that she was sure we could work something out, and that family was so important to them. The irony wasn't lost on me. But the call that surprised me came from my sister's maid of honor, someone I'd known since high school. She told me that after I left, the wedding continued, but there was an undercurrent of tension that hadn't been there before. During the reception, when the best man's speech mentioned the importance of family, several people had glanced toward the empty area where I should have been sitting. More importantly, she'd overheard a conversation between my sister and her new mother-in-law. Apparently, the decision to seat me behind the curtain hadn't been my sister's idea at all. The groom's mother had insisted that the seating reflect family hierarchy, and since I wasn't contributing anything significant to their future, I didn't warrant a prominent position. My sister had gone along with it. That hurt more than I'd expected. I could handle her being thoughtless or caught up in wedding stress. But knowing she'd actively chosen to go along with humiliating me, that was different. Update 2. A week after the wedding, my sister showed up at my apartment. I hadn't responded to any of the calls or messages, and apparently, she'd decided that a face-to-face conversation was necessary. She looked exhausted. Her honeymoon tint couldn't hide the stress lines around her eyes, and she'd clearly been crying recently. When I opened the door, she immediately started talking about how sorry she was, how she never meant for things to go so wrong, and how much she needed her big brother. I let her talk for a few minutes before asking her to come inside. We sat in my living room, and she continued her apologies, explaining how overwhelming wedding planning had been and how much pressure she'd felt from her new in-laws to do things their way. I asked her directly if she'd known about the seating arrangement. The question hung in the air for a long moment before she admitted that yes, she'd known. But she insisted she'd tried to fight it, that her mother-in-law had been insistent, and that she'd thought I would understand. She'd thought I would understand being treated like a second-class citizen at her wedding. I told her about the $10,000 I'd planned to give them. Her face went pale when I explained how long I'd been saving it, how many sacrifices I'd made to put that money aside for her special day. She started crying again, saying she had no idea, that she would have insisted on better seating if she'd known. But that was the problem. She shouldn't have needed to know about the money to treat me with basic respect and dignity. She begged me to reconsider, to give them another chance, to be part of their lives. She painted a picture of family dinners and holidays, of being the uncle to their future children, of rebuilding what we'd lost. It was tempting. She was my only family, and the thought of cutting ties completely was painful. But I kept thinking about that smirk on her father-in-law's face, the giggle from her husband, and most importantly, her willingness to go along with it all. I told her I needed time to think. She left that afternoon, and I didn't hear from her for 2 weeks. When she called again, her tone had changed. The apologetic desperation was gone, replaced by something that sounded almost like anger. She accused me of being dramatic, of holding a grudge over something that was really just a misunderstanding. She pointed out that I was the only family she had left, and that cutting her off was hurting both of us. She wasn't wrong about that last part. It was hurting, but some things, once broken, can't be put back together the same way. Update 3. 3 months have passed since the wedding, and I've had time to process everything that happened. The $10,000 I didn't give as a wedding gift went toward the down payment on a house I'd been considering. It's a small place, but it's mine, and there's something satisfying about knowing that money went toward my future instead of subsidizing my humiliation. I've heard through mutual friends that my sister's marriage is already showing strain. Apparently, the financial expectations from her new family are more demanding than she'd anticipated. Her husband's parents expect them to maintain a certain lifestyle, and his job, while prestigious, doesn't quite cover the expenses of keeping up with their social circle. The friends who stayed in touch tell me she's asked about me, wondering if I'm doing okay, if I'm happy. I am actually happier than I've been in years. There's something liberating about not constantly worrying about someone else's drama, not being on call for every crisis, not feeling responsible for another adult's poor decisions. I've started dating someone new, someone who doesn't know anything about my family situation and likes me for who I am rather than what I can provide. We're taking things slow, but for the first time in years, I'm thinking about building something for myself rather than maintaining something for someone else. Last month, I got a card in the mail. No return address, but I recognized my sister's handwriting. Inside was a simple message saying she missed me and hoped I was well. No apologies, no demands, just an acknowledgement that I existed and mattered to her. I kept the card. I'm not ready to rebuild that relationship, and I may never be. Trust, once broken so completely, takes time to repair, if it can be repaired at all. But the card sits on my kitchen counter as a reminder that some bridges, while damaged, might not be completely burned. The $10,000 bought me more than just part of a house. It bought me self-respect, boundaries, and the knowledge that I don't have to accept poor treatment just because it comes from family. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do is walk away from people who don't value you, even when it hurts. Especially when it hurts. I still think about that moment sometimes, standing behind that curtain with my gift in my hands. Part of me wonders what would have happened if I'd just sat down, stayed quiet, and let them treat me like I didn't matter. I probably would have given them the money anyway, smiled through the reception, and continued being the reliable big brother who never asked for anything in return. But I'm glad I didn't. Some lines shouldn't be crossed, and some behaviors shouldn't be tolerated, regardless of DNA or shared history. I learned that day that I'm worth more than a seat behind a curtain, and that lesson was worth every penny of that $10,000. The house is small, but every room in it knows I belong there. Every chair at my table is reserved for people who actually want me around. And when I eventually have my own important moments to celebrate, the guest list will include only people who've earned their place through respect and genuine care. That's real family.